Well, good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
All right, I am John King. I am a board member of the Kerouac Project of Orlando, as are many of the people in this room. And it's my honor to introduce Jennifer Worley, who is the Kerouac Resident for the fall of 2022, i.e. hurricane season. She's a professor of English at City College of San Francisco and president of the faculty union AFT 2121. Her film, Sex on Wheels, documents the history of San Francisco's sex industry and sex worker activism and has played at film festivals and universities worldwide. She's the author of Neon Girls, A Stripper's Education in Protest and Power, published by Harper Perennial in 2020. That book chronicles part of the underlife of San Francisco in the 1990s and the way the different communities converged to make the workforce of the Lusty Lady an all-nude peep show that would eventually become unionized and then eventually a co-op workplace. This memoir has much honesty and insight about the world of stripping that explores the tensions between empowerment and exploitation that is possible in a small mirrored room that distorts and amplifies the male gaze. By the way, that's also in my Amazon review. She set the scene in San Francisco with a nod to the Beat Generation writers. I waited for my girlfriend RJ at Cafe Triste in North Beach, the San Francisco neighborhood that had been home to beatniks like Lawrence Ferlinghetti and Jack Kerouac 40 years before. A few gray-bearded beats remained, hanging around City Lights bookstore or publishing shopping carts, pushing. Did I say publishing? Nope, all right, that's worse. Pushing shopping carts through Washington Square, but Allen Ginsberg's angel-headed hipsters had mostly been replaced by tourists in brand new sweatshirts purchased that morning at Fisherman's Wharf when the damp, chilly fog crushed their dreams of a sunny California vacation. Her writing journey has taken her from San Francisco to another city overwhelmed by tourism, but to stay in a small place where Jack Kerouac wrote the first draft of the Dharma Bums 3 decades before a mouse would loom so large out west of town. Jennifer's writing is powerful, instructive, poetic, and very much down to earth. During her residency, she has been working on fiction, perhaps autofiction, that explores the complex relationships human creatures have with one another, even at the most basic level. I'm proud to play this very small part, and sharing her work with you tonight. Give it up for Jenny.
Oh, thank you. That was the most thorough introduction I've ever had. That was so good. Thank you. And before I start reading, I wanted to say thanks so much to the board of the Kerouac Foundation and to the selection committee for this opportunity. It's really just been such a gift, and I've so enjoyed and appreciated the time I've had to spend here. And I know that it's a lot of work for you all, keeping this house up and fundraising and reading through all of the applications every year and everything that you do to support the writers who come through here. So thank you so much. I'm really grateful. And Shadow as well is so grateful. So before I start, just a little introduction. I have, if anyone would like to buy a copy of Neon Girls, I got my publisher to send me a box of them. So if anyone wants a copy, I have some on hand. And the what I've been working on, I have been trying my hand at fiction a little bit. My previous book is a memoir, and before that, my work was almost all academic writing. So I have a doctorate in English literature, so kind of literary analysis. So it's been a transition. I did John's seen some of my fiction, and Eric has heard some of it at the readings that he puts on. But I am reverting back to memoir for tonight, and it's the project that I had actually initially proposed to do when I wrote my application for this. It's changed somewhat, but it's a memoir about not having kids. And it's about the decision not to do that, what it means culturally, what it means for women to make that decision. And so I really appreciated getting a chance to get started on this. What I've come up with is it's very fragmentary, and I've got probably like I don't know, I'd say about 9 little, very short fragments that I'm going to build off of, but I think that I want to leave it in this somewhat fragmentary, evocative, less linear state, even as a complete document. So I'm, as an academic, I'm really accustomed to writing in a very analytical, linear way that in which X follows Y and Z follows that. But what I've tried to do here, or perhaps what I've wound up doing here, is much less linear. It's much more evocative and fragmentary. So, and the title, or the working title of the monograph, is Anotherhood. Anotherhood, fragments towards a theory of another life. So here goes. And if I know some folks need to leave, so if you need, I'm doing like little fragments with breaks between. So if you need to do that, I won't take offense. The whole reading will probably be about 30 minutes. Okay. Much has been written about motherhood, its meaning, its matter, its pleasures and struggles. Much less has been said about what it means and how it feels for a woman to choose deliberately to remain without child. But if motherhood is profoundly meaningful and life-changing, then too, deliberately foregoing this state must have its own set of meanings and ways of shaping lives and selves. More women are opting out of motherhood than at any time in recorded history. This shift has been explained by feminist Jenny Brown as an informal, what she calls, birth strike. Brown argues that the low birth rate in the US and other developed countries is an effect of women stopping or slowing down production, that is, remaining childless or limiting the number of kids they have, in direct response to the untenable working conditions surrounding motherhood, the lack of maternity leave, healthcare, affordable childcare, etc. Brown's analysis is brilliant, and as a former union leader, I love her expansion of the language of labor organizing to include women's reproductive labor. But I also want to understand intentional childlessness as not simply part of a birth strike, because doing so frames reproduction as the norm and the refusal as a rejection of that norm. Instead, I want to understand reproductive refusal as an act of imagination, creation, nurture, and care. And I want to imagine child-free life as not simply a turning away, but as a turning towards an embrace of that which would have been foreclosed. An analogy. My best friend is 6 years sober. To me, her sobriety looks like a not doing, an abstinence. But to her, sobriety is its own experience, a powerful, liberated state. She does not see this state as one in which she can't drink, or even in which she chooses not to drink. Rather, she experiences sobriety as pure freedom. She does not have to drink. In what follows, I want to imagine women's reproductive refusal as a sort of reproductive sobriety. Not simply an absence, but its own type of presence, a state I call anotherhood. Thank you for coming to talk. The rise in childlessness in developed countries in the early 21st century is not surprising, given that women now have more control over our fertility than at any point in recorded history. The overturning of Roe v. Wade in the U.S. notwithstanding, medical advancements have introduced a number of methods of contraception that have made this possible. But the rise in reproductive refusal has been facilitated not only by the availability of those technologies, but by feminism's other victories. The ability to work in professional fields or lucrative trades, to earn a self-supporting wage, to own a business, to work without sexual harassment, open bank accounts, credit lines. These economic shifts have allowed women to self-support, to divorce, remain single, to center our lives around other women or careers or creative lives, rather than around husbands and children. The opening up of these possibilities has been perhaps even more significant than the ability to control fertility. You can see my academic self coming out. But these changes have opened up the female imagination and allowed us to dream new lives. For the first time, motherhood is facing some stiff competition. So that's fragment one. I'm going to put him in the bedrooms. I locked him back in Jack's room. Okay. So this is fragment one. During the first year of her child's life, when Maisie, a friend of mine from my exotic dancing days, when she was 30, she reflected on how motherhood had changed her relationship to her own body. I no longer see my body as aesthetic or decorative or an object of desire. Now, my body feels more like a tree that's fallen and is decomposing, and a lush growth of saplings and moss and ferns are emerging out of it. Perhaps this sounds a little more morbid than it did when Maisie relayed it to me. She wasn't depressed or grieving or feeling that her life was over. Rather, she was noticing and marking a specific shift in her own position in the wheel of life. I experienced a similar shift after my parents died, and I realized grimly that my generation was next. Looking at my nieces and nephews after my mother's funeral mass, I thought, I'm standing between you and death. If it isn't obvious, I am not the fun aunt. I've always felt an internal resistance to the existential line of succession that reproduction implies. People speak of raising the new generation, of life not being all about me anymore, of children being the future. When she was pregnant, Maisie said she had this strong sense that her child was going to do something important. She's kind of a witchy woo-woo girl like that. This sentiment has always bothered me, though, not because it's unrealistic or messianic, but because it cedes to the child the possibilities of the self. It feels like a giving up, a giving over, and assigning to the next generation responsibility for the full and exhaustive exercise of one's own gifts and aspirations. And though people speak of having children as a show of responsibility, it's always looked to me more like an abdication, like kicking the existential can down the generational road. So fragment 3. The guilt of what I cost my own mother has always dragged on me like an anchor in a sandy-bottomed river. Perhaps I thought refusing to be that anchor for another would finally, mercifully free me from its drowning weight. Most of my life, I balked at knowing anything of my mother's past. I wanted only her pure present so that no losses could be tallied against my score or billed against my account. Half the world are daughters, but daughterhood isn't even a word. Perhaps because it's best for all of us if we don't name that excruciating state. The guilt of daughterhood drips and surges through generations, born in silence and outside of language. Unrecountable, but also counted out in pennies and dimes of loss, of opportunities denied, hopefully passed on, but more often ungratefully refused. My mother was born in 1931 in Buffalo, New York, an only child. So strange a fact for a woman who'd later have 8 children of her own. I never asked when she was alive what led my mother to decide to bear 8 of us. If indeed decide is a word applicable to this question, asked of a woman with a high school education at mid-century. Certainly at some level, she must have chosen. 4 of us were born after 1960, when the pill was introduced, and other families, even those whose parents were of the age of mine, had 2, 3, maybe 4 kids at most. In high school, my mother was an extremely gifted student who won a scholarship to college and wanted desperately to enroll. But her mother told her it was a waste for a girl to go to college because she would just end up getting married and staying home to take care of her children. And so my mother did just that. She married my father at 20 and never had a job after that. Not because they were wealthy, but because, even for working class people in the 1950s, in then prosperous blue-collar Buffalo, it was possible, even typical. She had her first child at age 20 and 7 more over the next 20 years. My mother cooked and cleaned and took care of children for 35 years. She did her best to engage herself as well, taking us to museums, to the aquarium, to the public swimming pool with the 3-meter diving board. But though she never spoke directly of their contents, her frustrated dreams flowed under the bedrock and topsoil of our family life, a toxic underground stream that watered our roots. 10 miles from my childhood home was the Niagara Falls, New York neighborhood of Love Canal. As a child in the 1970s and 80s, I heard this place mentioned frequently, and the name always conjured images of a delightful park with a lazy blue stream where men in straw hats rode ladies with parasols around in little pastel-colored boats, past ducks and willow trees and Huck Finn-esque barefoot children fishing on the banks. I admit my fantasies were chronologically and regionally dissonant. Despite its blue-collar printing error. Despite its fanciful name, Love Canal was neither a lover's lane nor even a canal, but a dump site for 21,000 tons of toxic chemicals from the Manhattan Project, filled in and repurposed in the 1950s as a suburban development of split-level houses, sidewalks, public schools, and manicured lawns. By the 1970s, when I was a child, I was hearing its name mentioned so frequently because 56% of children born in the neighborhood had severe birth defects, and the EPA found that the area had a disturbingly high rate of miscarriages, nervous disorders, cancers, and toxic materials in the milk of nursing mothers. That mother's milk, wombs, and birth were all the sites of toxins' emergence is not lost on me. The mother-child relation seems in every way fraught with toxicity, the place where poison is imbibed, absorbed, or excreted from glands by one generation makes itself felt on the next. That cancer grew from this atomic mid-century soil below all those manicured lawns does not surprise me either, for cancer killed my mother in a year's time, but surely rested beneath her skin for decades. Not sure what number I'm on, but let's call this fragment 5. Much of child-free discourse takes a boasting, taunting, frivolous stance. There is, of course, an entire genre of TikTok videos dedicated to child-free adults flaunting their freedom and waving piles of cash at the camera and laughing. The famously child-free comedian Chelsea Handler produced a mock public service announcement that opens with her speaking to the camera from her bed. Well, hello, guess what? I just woke up and it's 1 o'clock in the afternoon. I can sleep as late as I want because I don't have any fucking kids. I laugh along with these heretical jabs at our culture's sentimental view of family and motherhood, and I understand the impulse to celebrate and exaggerate the decadence of child-free life. Indeed, when I was planning a documentary film on the topic, a friend suggested that I open with a shot of a white sofa, an emblem of all that parenthood makes impossible. But I want to avoid reveling in the more superficial pleasures of childless life or throwing frivolous material benefits in the faces of those who've gone another way. For me, refusing motherhood has been about more than lazy mornings and white couches. It has reserved a space in my life for creative work, for travel, and political activism. I've written a book, I've made a movie, I've directed street theater, started a labor union, led another labor union, learned to surf, bicycled through California, Europe, Vietnam, Ireland, Scotland, and Italy, and learned to play ice hockey in middle age. It's also led me to forge and be accountable to and rely upon new networks of connection and support, formed of relationships beyond the family, of friends, lovers, exes, students, neighbors, and comrades. After the birth of her second daughter in January 1856, first-wave feminist and suffragette Elizabeth Cady Stanton wrote to Susan B. Anthony, quote, "I'm very happy that the terrible ordeal has passed and that the result is another daughter. But I feel disappointed and sad at the same time that this grievous interruption of my plans." A few months later, Katie Stanton wrote again to Anthony to report that caring for her newborn had prevented her from making progress on a speech, which Susan B. Anthony was scheduled to deliver very soon. In response, Anthony complained, "Those of you who have the talent to do honor to poor womanhood have all given yourself over to baby making and left poor me to do battle alone. It's a shame. Such a body as I might be spared to rock cradles, but it is a crime for you to be doing it." In his early teens, my friend Alicia's son became an online junkie, gradually drawn into a right-wing, woman-hating cyber gang on Reddit. He's become one of those misogynistic gamers who harass feminists with hate posts and death threats, Alicia reported angrily one night over sushi. That's who they are, spoiled, white, 14-year-old virgins. He was like a sticky tape lint roller, collecting every hatred, every fuzzy, poorly conceived position as he rolled over the internet. More and more hateful lint and dust from Reddit, 4chan, 8chan stuck to him until he was covered in vitriol. Adolescence saw him sprouting angry tufts of misogyny, emitting racism like body odor, and breaking out in homophobia, despite, or more likely because of, having been raised by gay parents. I vaguely expected the boy to shoot up his school in the next few years. The night Trump was elected, I stayed up late, scraping the internet for dregs of hope that it wasn't over, that it hadn't happened, that the morning would bring a reversal of fortune, an undoing of our undoing. On Facebook, I saw that everyone else was up as well, doing much the same. At 2 a.m., Alicia posted a cry for help. "Is anyone awake? I need to talk." I replied, "I'm up, call me." "What did I do?" Alicia wept when I answered the phone. "I wasted years of my life raising an entitled, hateful, rich, white boy." I felt genuinely and deeply sad for her. I imagined how it must feel to have created his very body from scratch inside her own, painfully birthed him, and invested years of time and care only to yield someone who seemed to loathe her. I imagined how it must feel to see her monstrous creation now writ large on the nation itself, as if to taunt and shame her. It isn't your fault. The internet got him, I told her. We spoke of our disbelief in what had passed and of our forebodings for a time to come until we were ready at last to sleep. A year later, the horrible boy had grown up to nearly a horrible man. He was now a confirmed and bitter woman hater who parroted talking points from pickup artists and incels. His other parent wanted the boy to live with her. Let her have him, I told Alicia. You don't deserve this. He's awful to you. I don't want him lost forever. The parents compromise on a boarding school. This is actually what Alicia wants, but in order to get her ex to agree, Alicia must pretend that she actually wants custody, but is meeting her ex halfway. This bluffing and raising and feigning giving in to the other is the way of divorce and often of marriage. The monster child is sent to an expensive boarding school for shitty kids, or as they say, young people with histories of behavioral problems. There's mountain biking and skiing and computer programming. For the first time outside of 4chan, the boy makes friends. He's good at mountain biking, racing, and he loves it. He loves this school and being with other shitty kids and being away from his mother. He is born anew, a changed monster. To celebrate, he mercilessly harasses a girl from his class on social media and calls her a murderer and a whore for stating that she is pro-choice. The headmistress expels him immediately. Alicia is crushed and calls the headmistress to plead her son's case. I know that she's actually pleading on her own behalf. It doesn't work. The boy is sent home. Alicia asks if I know how to get him into the dual enrollment classes for high school students at the community college where I teach. I don't know much about it. Still, I could figure it out. I could figure out how to help him, but the truth is, I don't want to. I don't want to give him any more of my time and resources that could go to my students whose entire families are being evicted from Section 8 housing, or who are being stalked by battering ex-boyfriends, or who are sleeping in their cars. I don't want to subject my colleagues to an entitled boy who will disrupt their classes with know-it-allisms, arrogance, and disdain for the students who've clawed their way here across rival gang territory to get to community college. This boy will get yet another second chance because some woman will extend herself for him, but that woman will not be me. When I pick up my pen to write the complaints of a child-free woman, a wall of ugly stereotypes and cliches begins to brick me in. Old maid, spinster, battle axe. Once so designated, a woman's voice is easily dismissed as sad, bitter, pathetic. I note that those terms all refer to a woman without a man, only by inference, to denote her further reproductive failings. Living unpartnered and without child is challenging. I've only known how challenging since my divorce 7 years ago. We build our lives like houses without nails, depending on the pressure of beam against beam, leaning into one another for support. Some of my parent friends are thrilled to celebrate me, their child-free but doting comrade. I'm grateful for my child-free friends, they announce magnanimously. They're there to give me a break when I need it. And they love taking my kid to the zoo, aquarium, or park. Even in their efforts to accept, they can only reconcile my childlessness by placing it in service of their own parenting. They believe that not condemning me is enough, so long as I make myself useful in the reproductive scheme of things. It has no value of its own. And mostly I accept this, but what I want to say is, ante up, girl. What have you done for me? Have you, say, scheduled and planned a trip with me because you know I don't have a standby travel partner? Have you thrown me a shower when I got tenure at my job, like I threw one for you when you got pregnant, engaged, pregnant again? And so my childless tribe wanders, watching families celebrate themselves and throw us crumbs of offhand thanks. During the pandemic, these questions came to the fore. Alone and isolated, I watched my mom friends form pods and take supposedly socially distanced family trips. All the while, I holed up in my place, knowing that if I got really sick, no one would bring me soup or feed my dog or take me to the hospital if I couldn't breathe. Still, quarantined in my solitude, watching the families from afar on social media, daily I prayed a heartfelt, silent prayer of gratitude. Thank God, thank God, thank God I am not quarantined with a teenager. When I was 14, I traveled with my next oldest sister, who was maybe 22 at the time, from Buffalo to Rotterdam, New York, to take care of our married sister's 2 small children. I have a lot of sisters, but there's 3 in this narrative. Well, she and her husband went away for the weekend to Lake George. Maybe it was their wedding anniversary. It must have been summer. I can't remember. In any case, my married sister lived in a two-bedroom rented house with a yard fenced by chain link. Previous to this visit, I had doted on the children, a precocious little girl of 2 and a worried little boy just shy of 1. I was excited to spend the weekend away from home, excited for the train journey, and excited to spend time with the adorable little ones. I played with the children out in the yard, pushed them in their swing set, and in little plastic vehicles. We ordered pizza with mushrooms, and the little girl, who had never had mushrooms before, declared that she loved mushrooms. We put them to bed at 7 p.m. as instructed, then made popcorn, poured root beers, and watched TV, interrupted every hour by the whining and crying of the little boy, who was teething. We picked him up and walked him back and forth until he slept. My sister gave him baby aspirin and rubbed his back until he fell asleep in his crib, his sister sleeping soundly in her little bed. Once he'd gone back to sleep, we crashed as well in our older sister's queen bed. But at midnight, 1 a.m., and 2, he woke again and again, crying. At 3, he cried again, waking his sister this time. At 5, the children woke in earnest, noisy and ready for the day to start. I don't like them anymore, I told my sister, pulling the pillow over my head, almost crying myself. She went to get them up and fed, while teenaged I grumpily slept on. When I finally awoke and went downstairs, I found the children cheerfully eating cereal and watching cartoons, my sister dozing on the couch. The pair greeted me merrily, and I glared at them. It seemed as if they were mocking me, acting as if the turbulent previous night of torture had never happened. To trace my resistance to motherhood to this weekend seems to suggest that my decision in adulthood was based, embarrassingly, on adolescent sloth and an immature refusal of responsibility. This is true, in part. But I tell this story to highlight something more, that my resistance to motherhood is neither innate, as some assume, nor based on a dislike for children, but rather grounded in experience. This experience has become somewhat uncommon among my peers. Unlike generations past, few of us grew up in extended or large immediate families. As a result, few of us were charged in adolescence with the care of younger siblings, as were my older sisters, or with that of older siblings' offspring. Instead, most of my peers' experience of family is one in which parents provide care and financial support to their typically 2 close in age offspring, whose only role in the family is to receive that care and support. As a result, many in my generation seem to see the family as a site of care and nurturance, with little grasp of the experience of those providing that care and nurturance. Indeed, this is how we imagine childhood, youth, and even early adulthood should be. But it is this experience of the family that allows so many to idealize and romanticize motherhood, to imagine it as an experience of perfect love, patience, wholeness, and satisfaction. They've never been awakened repeatedly in a single night by a howling child too young to articulate the source of his pain, and then torn from adolescent sleep at 5 by that same child, now oblivious to the night before. And this allows them to imagine motherhood as a return to care and nurturance without knowing the costs until it's too late. I think this is my last, this is the last piece. Alicia and I met in our 20s, both nude dancers at a peep show. She lived a glamorous life, a stand-up comic, a writer, an it girl of the San Francisco Leatherdyke scene, always with one just dumped girlfriend in the rearview mirror, one in the passenger seat, and one in her sights just down the road. In our 30s, we grew apart. Alicia had a baby. We grow apart. Alicia has a baby. I get my PhD. She marries a guy. I make a film. She buys a minivan. I get a new job. She tells me she's pregnant again. Judgmentally, I wonder why. The first one left her devastated. I finish my book. She has the next baby. I forage for women who eschew the norm and build a web of lasting and meaningful connections of something that is not blood. Alicia, it seems to me, has built her life from a kit. With a husband, a big Victorian house, 2 boy children, and a Subaru with a car seat in the back, Alicia gradually becomes foreign to me. She takes family vacations, I take solo cycling trips, or go canoe camping with my single child-free friends. She can't make it to holidays because she's visiting Matt's family or taking a family trip to Tahoe. She can't play poker because she has to take the younger boy to judo or the older one to coding camp. She can't come to my birthday because it's New Year's Eve and it's impossible to get a sitter that night. One day, she tells me that her partner's mother has developed dementia. Alicia is given to overplanning for future catastrophes. So she reports matter-of-factly, Matt will probably get it eventually too. My plan is to put him in a nursing home and then come live with you. We can be single old ladies together. She looks at me expectantly, clearly hoping that I'll be thrilled to be cast as co-star in her remake of The Golden Girls. In that moment, I understand that Alicia simply cannot see me as I am. So many interchanges have taught me this in previous years. The time I asked her to help me move and she showed up with her baby in arms. The time I'd had to request that she sometimes ask me about my life when we met. My divorce party, where she toasted me with a story in which I saw no reflection of myself. And now, after spending 18 years of time and care on 2 boys and a man, she claims as her plan B the life I've cobbled together in spite of her. The house I've wrested from a shitty ex with lawyers and a co-signed mortgage. The small but sturdy web of childless women who vacation with me and build a piñata of my ex for my divorce party and fill it with tiny bottles of Maker's Mark. The garden in my yard whose frame I'd built and whose soil I've grown from composted apple cores and oyster shells. The 6 bins of Halloween decorations I've collected to terrify and delight the neighborhood children. Those children themselves whom I've befriended, let win at Foursquare, supplied with backyard lemons for their lemonade stands. The holiday dinners I arrange and cook for singles and child-free friends. The my book is my baby showers I've thrown for writer friends. The comrades I've bailed out of jail after demonstrations, the solo trips I've planned and navigated on my own. All this, she assumes, is hers for the taking, as if by forging a full life as a single non-mom, I have only been keeping her seat warm. Sometimes my anger is so complicated and inchoate that my better self quickly, silently repackage and tapes it shut and seals it in shrink wrap for good measure. I will open this later, I tell myself, placing my fury on an internal shelf. I will open this bitter gift at home alone when the giver is absent. All right. Yes, that's it. Those are all the fragments.